Most don't know this about my father, but he was one of the first men in the state to win joint custody after a divorce. He went in swinging and came out with the dubious victory of taking care of me and my sister for half of his waking days. While precedent-setting, I do sometimes wonder if he ever regretted his choice. It was an exhausting one for the time. I doubt he did, though, for my dad was the type of person who committed to things despite the consequences. They chose custody dates like one would members for a dodgeball team. Saturday was especially coveted, and my dad dived with his first pick for that day. My mom countered with a Sunday. Soon the entire roster was filled. Monday at Mom's, Tuesday and Wednesday at Dad's, Thursday Mom, Saturday Dad, Sunday Mom. Oh, but Friday was special. Friday they split. Every other Friday our dad would have off work, so he'd wait for us after school. My sister was in elementary school, so she was done an hour before me. The two would wait at Mr. Frosty's. She would have rainbow sprinkles, and he a chocolate dip while they waited for 7th period to let out. I'd race out of history, usually my favorite, but far forgotten in the furor of off Fridays. Off Fridays meant trips and adventure and excitement. Off Fridays were our time with Dad. And off we would go, the Thomas Brothers map in my lap, and my sister bouncing in excitement in the back of the pickup's cab. "Let's go to the desert today," my dad might say, and my fat little 12-year-old finger would thumb through the maps to the right one, tracing out a route for us. "Highway 8, east," I'd say, and we'd be off. Pink Floyd wailing as he'd snake a route through mountain roads to go visit the apple town of Julian, or past emu farms to watch animals at dusk at the safari park, or down along the bay and beach to go rollerblading on the boardwalk at sunset. Sometimes we wouldn't go anywhere at all, and would instead head to Point Loma for a dinner at the Venetian. My sister would order cheese bread, and I'd pretend to be an adult, trying something new off the Italian restaurant's entrees section each week. Perhaps that last option was exercised too much. At the least, there's no doubt in the family history library that both myself and my sister carry the blame for our most infamous moment at that restaurant. In our defense, our trio had been going there for years. The two of us had grown comfortable. Still, we have yet to fully live down what we did. Once, long ago, the Venetian had a lovely waiting area, complete with window seats. The windows were frosted glass. This detail is important. Now, my sister and I, we weren't the worst children in the world. We weren't savages, for the most part. I often fancied myself as some grand princess in a fantasy novel. My sister was adorable and sweet, and mostly only ate cheese for the relevant years for this story. However, we were creative and creative leads to boredom at an alarming rate. We were the type of children who held photo shoots and made movies. Waiting to be seated for dinner was a hurdle on par with getting the ring to Mordor. It simply wasn't happening without some magic and Maiar intervention. Our dad went to the bathroom. In our defense, this was an amateur mistake on his part, and I would suggest my sister and I are thus, at the most, only 50% culpable for what happened next. Many a war has been lost to the bladder's calling, and this was no exception. Once again, let me set the scene. A waiting room, pleather benches stiff, stern, and cruel. Two children, hungry and bored and creative. Again, I must emphasize that we were creative children. With that forewarning, my father's trip to the bathroom becomes a starkly terrifying decision, the kind you scream at characters not to make in horror movies. He left. Free from our non-existent shackles, my sister and I gleefully revolted. At first, we just bounced on the pleather cushions. They were quite bouncy, but soon we felt the need for more. The frosted windows beckoned. I licked my finger and pressed it to the glass. A beautiful, soft remnant was left behind. The print of my touch ghosted across the glass in a vague blur. "Oh!" I murmured, delighted by this new revelation. "Look, we can leave marks." This was the beginning of the end. I began to paint, licking my finger and swooping it across the glass in wide streaks. I sketched out little clouds, a happy sun, even swaying flowers. And then I turned to my sister. 6 years younger, she had no chance. "You should lick the glass," I whispered with a giggle. She giggled back and immediately did so, leaving behind a blurry, wet blob across the frosted glass. We both found this incredibly amusing and began to pepper the plexi with pecks and slobber. This is when my dad returned. He said nothing. He never needed to. My father was a mild-mannered man, so as soon as he cleared his throat in just the right way, we both knew we had fucked up. And he cleared his throat. Shit. We smiled and fidgeted. Maybe he wouldn't notice? He said nothing. That was worse than punishment. Only on the worst offenses would he say nothing at all, letting us simmer in our own guilt. This was one of those offenses, and boy did we simmer. He let us stew for a week, an entire week, before he relented, finally taking us back to the restaurant. But we weren't coming to eat. Instead, he asked to speak to management. It was a family-owned place, so Joey, the owner's son, came out. Joey's known both of us since we're small. He grinned the moment he saw our woebegone attempts to avoid his eyes. He knew what we were there for. We had destroyed their windows. They had had to put in entirely new windows. We had messed up big time. "I think my girls have something to say," my dad said, eyebrows raising as he looked to us. We had no words, and blushes and tears were all that could be wrung out of us at first. Finally, eventually, after stern coaxing and much shame, we confessed our crime. We had destroyed the windows. We had painted them. We were the rogue kissers. Joey just grinned and winked at my dad, and then sat us at our usual booth, vanishing for a moment before returning with a beer. "Chicken parmesan?" he asked my dad, the usual order, and my father nodded, mirroring Joey's grin. Justice had been served. We learned many years later how frosted glass actually works.